Good evening. My name is Tom Giroux from the Forest History Association of Wisconsin. I'm a board member there, and I'd like to welcome you to tonight's webinar. Before we get started with that, though, I'd like to do a little shameless promotion of our organization. You can see our mission up here on the screen right now: inform, educate, archive, and publish. So if you would would want to become a member and support the Forest History Association of Wisconsin and contribute to this mission, we certainly would appreciate that. And you can see the web address in the middle of the screen for getting a membership, which is reasonable, $20 a year. And we'd love to have you as a member and to support the work that we do. So I'm going to turn it over to my cohort here tonight, my coworker, Don Schnitzler.
Okay, and as Tom said, my name is Don Schnitzler. I'm also a member of the Forest History Association of Wisconsin Board of Directors, and I am pleased to welcome everyone to tonight's webinar presentation. This evening we have a talk entitled Land Restoration at Woodland Dunes Nature Center and Preserve, and it's being presented by Sue Crowley. She is the land manager at Woodland Dunes. Her background is in forestry, and her education was received at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She's worked for the Menominee Tribal Enterprises, Canal Forest Resources, American Forest Management Consulting Firms, and the Wisconsin DNR. And again, as I said, she's currently the land manager at Woodland Dunes, and she's been there since the spring of 2022. I had the good fortune of listening to a presentation she gave last year when the Forest History Association met at Two Rivers and visited the Woodland Dunes, and she was giving an overview of the facilities there. It was a great presentation, and thank you for that again, Sue. So tonight, Sue is going to talk about the grassroots history of the Woodland Dunes Nature Center, talk about some of their current efforts to restore and maintain quality habitats for all the creatures in or passing through the land. And she makes a point of saying that includes the humans. We're all related to the land too. So there are several great projects that she plans to highlight tonight, and I will allow her to do that in just a minute. But before turning the screen over to Sue, a couple of housekeeping issues to help the webinar run more smoothly tonight. First, if you're listening, or as you're listening to the webinar, you have questions come up, you can jot those questions down in the chat feature at the bottom of the screen. Most of the time it's located at the bottom of the screen. For some people, it might be located at the top of the screen. Just look for the chat feature. It's been activated, and you should be able to type your comments in there. We're going to hold all the questions to the end of the presentation and then relay them to Sue for her to answer. And if you experience any difficulties during the presentation, you can use that same chat feature to reach out to either Tom or I, and we'll see what we can do in the background to quickly resolve those issues. And so the last comment that I should be mentioned is that the presentation will be recorded, and that video recording should be up on our YouTube channel sometime tomorrow morning. And with that, I'm going to pass this over to our speaker, Sue Crowley. Welcome, Sue, and take it away.
Right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Don and Tom, for inviting me to present at this webinar. It's always a pleasure to be able to talk about Woodland Dunes Nature Center. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Share the screen thing. Bear with me. All right, you should be able to see a beautiful picture of the boardwalk that leads out to the West Twin River from a tower that's just behind me right now here at the Woodland Dunes Nature Center and Preserve. This piece of property is near and dear to our hearts because of, I think, of its grassroots origins. We're going to go right to that. This fellow, Bernie Bouchot, was a local birder in the area. He loved to tromp through the lands that are around here, both private and public lands. And he just decided, hey, you know, this is a really important area. And I think we need to do something to potentially preserve it. So he got together with a group of his friends and he came up with this idea, the Woodland Dunes Nature Center and Preserve. And they put together this two-part mission, and the two parts are certainly really critical, each one together. So it's to protect our globally important habitat by maintaining its ecological integrity, and to educate our community in understanding and appreciating the value of nature. And the goal of this was to do it where anybody can access the lands. We are open, trails are open from sunset to sundown, no charge. Of course, we love a donation, but we really want anybody to be able to use the property. So we were founded 1974. If you do the math, that means we're coming up on 50 years pretty quickly. But in 1974, in order to really make this place the place, is to actually acquire some land. So they saved and they saved. They worked with local school children to even save those cans to help get that money. So eventually, had enough to get that first parcel of 20 acres. And then additional 20 acres was donated by the lady that had lived next door. So you can see here in the photos, we have our yellow birch trail, which winds through our hemlock, northern hardwood, more of a red maple beech, white pine type of forest on the upland part. And then over here to the left is Bernie, right away jumping in and teaching those school children. So our school programs, past and present, are taught by volunteers. We recruited folks. We realized couldn't do it all by themselves. So what other folks in the community that were excited about nature and teaching about nature, we call them our teacher naturalists, or TNs. Some of those original teacher naturalists are still here and volunteering today. On the bottom left is one of our maple syrup programs that we offer, usually 5 or 6 of them in March into maybe April, depending on the season and the school schedule. And then to the right, we have a great example of Bernie teaching a group of young school kids in what we call the brush pile. It's an awesome structure that we do put a whole bunch of brush over. And then we ask the kids about what they think the animals feel and why they like to be in this brush pile and which animals might be using that. So education was super important. The Romulo Farm was the first piece where we had a building that was purchased down here in the corner, as you might see. I am sitting in that farmhouse right now as we give that presentation. This old dairy farm grew peas and corn, and you can see it extended all the way out to the West Twin River. But it was turned into offices, education room, and a small meeting space. From there, we've grown, we've expanded, and we have over 7 miles of trails. We're working on our trail maps still, but down here is where the Yellow Birch Trail, the first 20-acre and 40-acre piece, are located. We have a great dune segment of the Ice Age Trail that passes through our property that has become super popular. And then several of our other trails that folks love to use. building upgrades have taken place over the last few years. We've grown quite large compared to from what we started from. The Aaliyah family donated a large sum of money to help us get this project done. It will, I don't know if you all can, okay, that does move, excuse me. If you can see, this is the place that I'm sitting in right now. We have this education center that got added on, I believe in the early, I want to say 1990s or so. And then this newest addition in 2020 that really expanded our ability to host and highlight the resources here at Woodland Dunes. So that includes this lobby, a nice gift shop, some really good public bathrooms, a little bit of a kitchen, and a large event space. That means that this room here could be dedicated entirely to kids' education. With those new upgrades, the other thing that came to fruition is we were thinking about the environment. Our parking lot with its permeable surface, we get comments on that all the time. It's pea gravel with the plastic netting to kind of hold that in place. We had a very generous donor that has an electric car charging station. It's one of the only ones here in Two Rivers. And we have since put up additional solar panels here on the new building, which supplies up to 60% of our electricity needs. So present day, our acreage is up to 1,500 acres of the preserve. We do have a bit of a focus, as I think a lot of people are hearing about nowadays, is the focus on pollinators. So about 300 of those acres are dedicated towards managing for their habitat. What you see in the bottom picture here is what we call our butterfly and bee garden. It is right off the back part of our nature center, and it provides an awesome space for people to come and see what plants they may like to plant in their garden, or just to come and enjoy and watch the butterflies and the bees. Over this summer, we all ran out one day because the bees were just really buzzing around, and I think we identified up to 7 bee species just that one afternoon. As the slide says, we do focus a lot on birds, especially Bernie as the originator and our current director, Jim Nickelbein. He is also a master bird bander and an excellent birder. About 200 plus species of birds are found either living here or passing through here. We're considered an important bird area. It's an actual classification. We still uphold our 2-part mission. Some of the main projects that we have been doing, and I'll talk a little bit more about these as we get going, but we've been planting about 2,500 trees for the past 6 years. Those were through a U.S. Forest Service grant. We hired interns, and it was to help mitigate for the onslaught of the destruction that the emerald ash borer causes to the ash trees. A large part of our wetland forest is green ash and some black ash as well. So for folks that are familiar with that bug, that kills all of those ash trees. And the other main activity that we do to enhance the integrity of the natural environment is working on removing invasive plants. A lot of the big 3 are barberry, honeysuckle, and buckthorn. And then occasionally adding more land so that more plants and wildlife have a place that is protected. We continue to educate school children, but also plenty of adult programs. And as I said, Jim Nickelbein, our executive director, is a master bird bander. So we do continue to band songbirds and owls, specifically these cute little guys, the saltwood owls. We have a fairly small staff. The folks on the top are all full-time staff, and the three of us on the bottom are part-time folks. It probably could be full-time, but I accepted the gig at part-time at least for now. So it's composed of Jim, our director, Jess is assistant director and education coordinator extraordinaire. She puts on many programs. Nancy Nabak does a fantastic job on communications and development. Kennedy Zittel actually was one of our interns, and she has since become on staff as our naturalist. Jen Thompson keeps us going and straight with what our numbers are doing, and then Wendy oversees that butterfly garden and works with a lot of volunteers. Which brings me to the next slide. You can't run a nonprofit nature center without good volunteers, and that we have. We probably have about 4,000 hours per year in volunteer help, from front desk like Barb here, who is usually here on Tuesdays, to the several TNs that are helping out with education programs. Most of the TNs are usually helping with the children's programs, but occasionally adult programs as well. Volunteers on habitat work. Yes, we have lots of grants, but we also have a hunter program. The hunters get assigned a certain area. They pay a very small fee, but then they are obligated to put in about 10 hours of work per year. So that is always helpful. They do some habitat work. They like to do boardwalk building, and we're very grateful for all their talents that they bring to us. And last but not least, a volunteer is our 15-member board of directors that helps guide us. So I said we have currently 1,500 acres. This slide shows the blue boundary of where our preserve currently is, with the exception of one piece way over in Manitowoc that is about 60 acres. It's on the Manitowoc River. For folks that might be familiar, it is also near Camp Vitz Park. So this, to orient you, this is the city of Two Rivers. Over on this side, you will find this to be the south end of Point Beach State Forest. We were donated a very small parcel there. This is the Romlo farm that I had showed you, pardon me. And then up top here is a piece between the rivers, another donation piece, the Boogler Preserve. And I want to point out, besides this main preserve here, this piece over on the west side of the property is the Henry Preserve. And I'll talk a little bit more about each of these and some of the projects that we have going on there. All right, so we'll start out with the Ramlo Farm area. This was about 190 acres. Here you can see this is a 2020 aerial photo. This is our current nature center. I think it was just being completed with the addition. We have a couple of ponds that were put in. We have a boardwalk that I showed you from the initial slide and beginning photo. That boardwalk goes all the way out to the river. There is a fun kayak launch that you can get you out onto the West Twin. Always fun to look at older photos. Again, I had shown this before, the 1940 photo versus roughly current day. You can definitely see how we were farmed all the way up to the river in some fashion, and what it has, I guess, recovered to, if you will, since Woodland Dunes being the caretaker of this property now. Projects that are going on in this particular part of the preserve are several, and this is only a few to mention. We've done this past year some tree planting with our SOGL grant, SOGL being Sustain Our Great Lakes. We partnered with the Wisconsin Bird and Bat Observatory Association. They actually are the holder of the grant, but we got a tree planting of about 4 acres, and only 400 trees did we put in there. There's a lot of black and green ash in this area. It is one of the main trails that we use for education. So we wanted to, again, help thwart the results of emerald ash borer. And so we did some planting in there. All that planting was done with volunteer help from folks like Fox Community Credit Union, Orion Industries, a church group, and several of our hunters. The other pictures that I have here, I wanted to show you what kind of stock we were planting. In this particular area for this SOGL grant project, we did some black willow, buttonbush, swamp white oak, and bur oak were the 4 species that we planted for this particular project. The other thing going on this part of the preserve is some wild rice planting. I'll talk about that in the next slide. And then we are very excited to have a planned boardwalk, a planned boardwalk project. Cattail boardwalk that you see pictured here is almost 40 years old. It has held up really well, but we decided it was time to do the rebuild. We were very fortunate to get some funding from the West Foundation here out of Manitowoc, and a grant that we had written, Jim had written from the Trails grant from the Wisconsin DNR. By this time next year, we are really hoping to have a brand new, fully accessible cattail boardwalk. It will be about 1,000 feet of boardwalk that will be remade. So I said wild rice planting. Oh, this is the 3rd year we've done wild rice planting. This gentleman here, Titus Selheimer, who works for the Sea Grant Institute out of UW Manitowoc, has procured wild rice. Who really wanted to honor what was here many years ago, the Native Americans that had been part of this land as theirs, to reestablish some wild rice. On the bottom, excuse me, on the bottom left-hand side, you can see this year's remnants of wild rice that had come up from last year's planting. This picture with Titus and a few other board members and volunteers and myself, we did planting on that snowstorm day on Halloween. A couple days later, we took the rest of the rice seed that we had and took it out to the river and did some planting out there as well. Next up, we'd like to talk about some projects in these two preserves. The main preserve being about 940 acres. You can see when I said the globally important habitat, these ridges and swales pattern that you can see in this aerial photo. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later, but that's a definite pattern and why this is so globally important. And this, we call this the Henry Preserve. It's actually expanded out to here. It is also a great story for me to share with you. So projects on that main preserve area, we got an alphabet soup listed here, but I will walk you through it. So the first I already touched upon, the U.S. Forest Service and under the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, tree and shrub planting to mitigate for the emerald ash borer's effects on all those ash trees. As I said, we've planted 2,500 trees roughly over the last 6 years in different areas. It gives you an example of how we planted those trees. We used that same size stock. We've planted over 34 different species of trees and shrubs throughout those plantings. The cages, we use chicken wire in either PVC posts or this past year we went to bamboo, and that seemed to work pretty well. The trees or shrubs were either around this height or sometimes below this 4-foot fencing. Next up, the SOGO, which is again the sustain our Great Lakes from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. We've gotten several SOGO grants. This one's under what we call our SOGO 2 grant. It included community engagement. So there were a lot of other partners and areas that also partook in this grant, but we focused on invasive control. I will show you a little bit more of that on the next slide. And the third project, and this is the project I was really hoping to be able to show you a lot of, is our Forget-Me-Not Creek Meander project. It's funded through 3 different grant sources: the Sustain Our Great Lakes, the Fund for Lake Michigan, and the Great Lakes Sediment, Great Lakes Sediment Nutrient Remediation Program. But I will give you some more details, but these are some of the main projects we have going on the preserve. So the first one, again, the tree planting and shrub planting. I said it happened the last 6 years. So we planted this 50 acres in these 2 years, another 50 acres over here from 2020 to 2021. And then this past year, we planted this 26-acre portion, and the previous year in 2022 over here. This 2022 year was quite a challenge lugging those trees over the swales. The other, I think, great thing about these projects is that it enabled us to hire interns who have helped us immensely, and they seem to be quite rewarded with doing this work. So the thing that I had mentioned, the invasive control work, we worked with a large company, their consulting company called Stantec. They have been instrumental in a couple of the grants that we have done. These are the areas that we were targeting originally to do invasive work. Up here was largely barberry. We did treatments in the winter with Stantec's doing much of the initial treatment. We skipped area 2. This trail running through here is the Ice Age Trail segment. We chose to focus on that so we could demonstrate to the public that is walking through our preserve what kind of work and projects they could see it firsthand, as opposed to being out here where there are no trails. So the picture over here of me standing next to this lovely honeysuckle wall, and then this bare ground is the result of the work that Stantec did last January with a forestry mulcher. They came through and pretty much chewed this all up. We decided we didn't have enough plants to worry about, that we would pick our way through it. We had our interns this summer come back through and treat the resprouts of this area. The other reason that, and I'm standing right about in this area, if you're looking for it on the map. The other good reason why we didn't necessarily take it all out at once is that honeysuckle is still providing a lot of good habitat for birds, and so we did not want to take it all out at once. At some point we will look to probably plant some more shrubs and trees in this area. Right. The other grant that I mentioned is this Forget-Me-Not Creek project that we are working very closely with Stantec Consulting on this. They did a lot of the design work. This is what showing you what the goal of the project is. We weren't, I was anticipated this being all done, and I had lots of fun pictures to show you. But we ran into some permitting issues, which we have since worked our way through, and we are ready to go and should be able to start this project soon after Thanksgiving. So what exactly are we looking at here? This is Woodland Drive, kind of near that Henry Preserve that I showed you. This is north, is facing this way. This is west, right up against the road. The Forget-Me-Not Creek currently is this straight, almost pretty much a ditch like format all the way down through here, and it flows all the way to Lake Michigan. So this project, which I don't remember, I don't think I shared the value of it. It's over $600,000 between the three grants that we procured for it. The goal is to re-meander it. It's about 2,700 feet of re-meander all the way through here. And the process by which they're going to do this is I thought really fascinating. They're not going to just dig this ditch and then figure out how to redirect the water. What's going to happen is it'll be stepwise. They will create this new channel and have it drain into here and then fill up the old channel and continue that all the way through. So these little connectors are there for the interim as the contractor slowly works through the re-meander. One of the things that we need, that they are going to need to stabilize and create good habitat are we're using 90 18-inch diameter trees, and I believe they range from 10 to 16 feet. We procured that wood from another project that was going on in southern Manitowoc County. So the trees were actually harvested late last spring. They were going to be cut down anyway because of the emerald ash borer at the Fisher Creek park in southern Manitowoc County. Because Stantec was also working on that project, we leveraged using those trees. So they're decked up still at Fisher Creek and waiting to come our way once we start breaking ground on the project. Working with the excavation contractor on this project, we think it's going to take anywhere from 2.5 to 3 months to complete everything on the project. That's given, we have all the right great weather conditions and we don't get too much snow. Maybe we can come back and talk about this in another year. I mentioned the Henry Wetland Preserve. So that's this piece on the west side of Woodland Dunes Road. The creek project is a little bit south of here. On the east side of the road, this is a great project that we also worked with Stantec on. It came to be because Dr. Henry and John Henry and his wife Annette were concerned that this piece of land was maybe going to be slated for an industrial park. This is the Dr. Henry's farm, which is also situated right here. He said, hey, if I get this piece and donate it to Woodland Dunes, what can we do with that? And we worked with Dr. Henry. He procured the land, donated it to Woodland Dunes. We worked with Stantec and Wisconsin DNR for a great project of restoring this farmland to a wonderful wetland preserve. It's only about 4 or 5 years old at this point. It does have a nice trail for you to walk through, as well as a viewing platform. It has been quite the success. One of the interesting things that came about as the project was coming underway is, you can imagine there was a lot of farm tile. There was various vintages of farm tile throughout this. Ended up being an 80-acre property. And because of that, it was almost 3 miles of tile that was removed from this area. So quite the success. The other thing that is really critical with this in seeding the area, it does have some tree planting along the adjacent neighbors' woods to sort of work on a gradation there. We wanted to put in a bigger pond, but there was concern. The airport is not too far away, so we had to make sure that the ponds the wet open areas weren't too big, so that we'd have too many geese wanting to land there. So we succeeded in keeping the wet open areas to the right size, and we passed that test, if you will. So today, if you go out there, that was an earlier photo, you see this beautiful grassland and wet prairie that is used by lots of birds, from meadowlarks to harriers to short-legged owls, among many others. Over 145 species of plants. We are still doing some follow-up. Reed canary, control, and other non-natives are also in there, but overall it is looking really good and a wonderful place to watch birds and do some plant ID. Last but not least, I'm going to talk about our Bugler Preserve. This is the piece of property that is sized here, 120 acres. Another donation from Donna Bugler. It provides us with the opportunity to house our interns in a nice old farmhouse. We can house up to 7 folks in that farmhouse, and I would say that that has really enabled us to be able to recruit and hire those interns from not only across the state, but even across the country. Well, what is really cool about this preserve is the wonderful grasslands that are here. These 2 fields are in the Conservation Reserve Program. The rest of the fields are not. The woods forest is in okay shape. As you can imagine, it was a farm. It was probably grazed, but currently the trees on there are composed of large diameter, 18 to 20 plus diameter white pine, red oak, hemlock, sugar maple, red maple, and some beech are the primary overstory species. I cleared a white pine, and it was up there in about 130 years old. So it's a really neat piece of property. Work that we've done, some invasive work on there, but I've just submitted a grant to the U.S. Forest Service, which we won't know the fate of until later this spring. But the grant proposes to erect a 9-acre deer exclosure, and then do some understory planting of herbaceous species. The reason we chose the herbaceous species to underplant is it does have a nice carpet of sugar maple in there, but it also has a lot of barberry, which so the grant also will, if granted, will be covering 25 acres of invasive species control. But why the understory species? Well, here is where we found our first rusty patch endangered bumblebee. So the rusty patch, I feel like, is, if anybody's on the bumblebee brigade at all, it seems like the coveted bee to find lately. And because there are so many people looking, it does seem like more and more people are finding them. But because we did find them here, we want to help support them. They really like the edge of the prairie / woodland, and nesting in those first 30 to 50 feet. And they like to depend on those spring ephemerals when the queens first come out in spring. So that's what we're trying to do with that grant that keep your fingers crossed that we are granted in the spring. Can't remember if I said this or not. The donor did not want us to have public trails on this preserve, but we do guided hikes. As you can see, folks walking out on the grassland area. And so if we, again, especially if we are granted this and are able to erect that deer exclosure, it would be a great story to tell for sure. So I've mentioned ridges and swales, and I probably should do that sooner in the presentation, but dunes and swales, ridges and swales, you might have heard of that. Lake Nipissing was the term for all of the Great Lakes combined. And as Lake Nipissing started to shrink and recede from what much higher water levels, these ridges and swales are what was formed. So the cartoon depiction here kind of shows you what was left, this being the sandy dune areas, eventually populated with more of the upland forest, and the swales with wetland species, anywhere from just small grasses and sedges to black ash swamps, if you will. The global importance of this is that this truly is unique to Wisconsin and Michigan. I believe are the main places that you'll find here, Manitowoc County, here at Woodland Dunes, also at Point Beach State Forest, and up the ridges appropriately in Door County, and then over into Michigan, you will find this landform, but not too many other places. It also means that it's, number one, as anybody that's on the call that may be foresters, mapping this is definitely a challenge, but it is a joy to see the variety and the uniqueness of these alternating swales. Again, you can see the striations. This depression area is a bigger swale area. For those that know, this is a Goodwin Road, and as the slide says, the other part about these is there was not enough high ground here for folks to necessarily want to farm this whole area. So that is likely the reason that it is still intact the way it is. Getting close to the end here, I'm going to show you with the cursor this area right here, my next slide. This past year, we had a really, really dry year, incredibly so, and I'm sure you all may have experienced that as well. Usually you walk around on the preserve in at least your knee boots for sure, but this year you could get away with your just regular hikers or regular leather boots if that's your preference, because it was so dry. And that spot that I showed you, this is what it normally looks like. This is a picture of that area in May. It tends to be much way just with green up. In the rest of the summer, at least 6 inches to a couple feet of water in there. But what we came across later in August across this boardwalk was this incredible field of nodding bidens. The aroma was quite taken. It almost felt like the plants were waving. They're completely dry underneath. These bidens were about 4.5 to 5 feet tall and just dominated this swale that was normally full of water. The monarch butterflies absolutely appreciated it because we were not, our prairies and other grassland areas did not bloom as well, I think due to our dry conditions, but the monarchs found the bidens. So it was just a very interesting surprise to all of us. Even our director, who has been on the preserve for over 30 years, had never experienced this in this swale. So with that, I really thank you for your time and interest in Woodland Dunes. We're going to be having 50 hikes for 50 years over for next year in our 50th. So hopefully you can make it out for one of those guided hikes. And I'd love to take your questions.
Thank you, Sue. It's really was a really excellent presentation, and we'll get right to asking a few questions here. So let's see, Scott is wondering, he suspects that much of this land would have been settled by Native Americans prior to settlement by the Europeans. And have you investigated the Native Americans association with the land there?
Jim Nickelbein, our director, has been much better at that. It's definitely been a number of different tribes that were in the area, from, I believe, the Potawatomi, some of the Menominee, Ojibwa, all were settled in this area. We do, and I probably am remiss, should have read our acknowledgement. We really do acknowledge that this was their lands originally, but I don't have much more detail than that, Scott.
Yeah, I think it's always important to remember that we're newcomers to the landscape, and that many of the native cultures have that traditional ecological knowledge, live so intimately with the natural resources that they really have a long memory when it comes to what was there on the land. So it's fascinating to talk to native communities about natural resources. So
Absolutely.
do they have biking on any of the trails in the property?
No, we do not allow biking on any of the trails. As a matter of fact, I know people do bike on the trails, but we really prefer folks not to ride bikes. The Ice Age, we also do not allow dogs on the trail, except for the Ice Age trail segment that runs through, that it's unacceptable to bring your dog on a leash on there. We prefer to have the least amount of disturbance as possible.
Do you ever use controlled burn as a method of management on the prairie lands? From
We
Tom?
have, yeah, actually we have done a controlled burn on about 40, it was a 48-acre piece in 2018. We utilized Fox Valley Tech burn crew, so it was both educational for them, as well as we had the proper burn plan in place and enough equipment, etc. So we did do mowing on that same piece just this year, and opted for the mowing option this go around, but we have done some burning.
Yeah, it always is helpful to use both methods. You can manage to do just as much with some strategic mowing as you can with burning, but burning does some other things too. So we have a comment about the Luss Hills in western Iowa, and I think it's just talking about the fact that sand hills and ridges are an important habitat, partly because you're of the diversity that you talked about. You have the swale followed by a sand dune followed by a swale, and that plant diversity helps diversify the insects and habitat. So lots of compliments about the program. I'm just looking down. Am I missing anything?
Can't hear you, Don.
Sorry about that. The one I noticed was that there's a question about, do you have winter guided tours?
Yes, we absolutely have several programs over the winter. We have a candlelight night hike that's very popular. I want to say January 24th, around that weekend or so. A lot of folks like to come out for that. There's usually a nice hike, then come in and have some hot chocolate, sit by the fireplace. Usually there's music in the big event space, and paper on the table. We love to have people draw and leave their messages of how they enjoyed the night. But there are also hikes, especially this coming year. There's going to be 50 hikes all year long. So just about every week you can come out and do a hike. They will be differently themed. I'm going to do one on Leap Day. So since we do have an extra day next year.
What about terrain as far as the hiking trails? is the train suitable for elderly, or is it better suited for younger people, or?
It depends on which trail, but most trails they're pretty flat. Occasionally, like Black Cherry Trail might have a few more routes than some of the other trails, but Ice Age Trail would probably be the cleanest, if you will. And our Cattail Boardwalk is always easy to get out on. And as we redo that next year, it will be even more accessible. But for the most part, we do have benches along the way too for people that want to take their time and take a rest as you hike through any of the trails.
And just out of curiosity, what kind of time frame? How long does a typical trail walk last?
We usually, if it's a guided hike, we usually shoot for about 45 minutes to an hour. Occasionally, there are longer hikes, but we'll give you that heads up. If you go to our website, which will be upgraded next year as well, but there's an events calendar on there. A lot of times we do ask people to register for those hikes, just so we can gauge how many people are coming, or so we can contact them if for some reason we need to cancel the hike due to really inclement weather. So.
Okay. Tom, do you have anything else?
No, just more compliments. I did want to mention I've done some wetland restoration, and it's amazing when you break that tile how things come back. And the native seedbed is still there a lot of times, and it's amazing how nature will repair the damage that was done. You just, as you know, always have to watch out for the invasive species, though.
Yes, in some sense, that the Henry restoration, it was kind of nice to start from the ag land that was relatively clean, as opposed to starting from a field that might have been fallow a lot longer and garnered much more invasives to deal with. Yeah.
All right.
Well, thank you much, Sue.
Yeah.
Well,
and just one comment
guys.
for everyone. Thank you for participating in our webinar tonight. When the webinar ends, there'll be a survey come out with 7 simple questions. We hope that you take the time to respond. We use the information for planning for future webinars. This is, however, the last webinar for 2023. We'll be back in January, 3rd Wednesday of the month with our next webinar. Happy holidays, everybody, and thank you again, Sue.
Thank you, guys.